Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It is the Monday show on a Tuesday because Aaron was away gallivanting, enjoying the sights of Barcelona, but he's back nicely tanned as well. Was it a bit warm?
It was. I think if I'd been doing this podcast 2 days earlier, it would be described more as a burn than a tan. It's settling nicely now, but it wasn't too good the other day.
You have got a bit of a glow, haven't you there?
Thank you. Yeah, it's not often I get compliments on this pod, but hopefully the viewers think the same as well.
So we are back, like we say, it is Tuesday, but it is the Monday show. And with no club football having been played over the last week or so, of course, Newcastle do face Manchester United on Sunday. We thought we'd look ahead to the summer window, and we've gone through all the gossip and rumours, and we've picked the big 5 links that have cropped up over the last few weeks and months ahead of the summer transfer window. Now, of course, Newcastle's business in the summer will depend largely on which competition they are in on the European stage. Will it be the Champions League? Will it be something a little less glamorous? That's going to play a major impact on what Newcastle United do in the summer. Eddie Howe has already said that they are working off more than one list because they just don't know what competition they're going to be in. That said, they are the same kind of 4 or 5 names that are consistently linked to Newcastle United. We're going to go through them today. We're going to discuss whether we think they're going to happen, whether we think Newcastle United need them, and just really give a little bit of our understanding on what to expect this summer. So if you're watching live on YouTube, hit that subscribe button and also get into the comments and let us know what you think about the names mentioned and if we've missed anyone off this big 5 list. Aaron, we're going to start with probably the most consistent transfer rumour of the last year, and that is James Maddison, the Leicester City forward. His contract does expire August 2024, so you'll just have a year left to run. No secret that Leicester would like to get him signed up, but they're not going to be playing European football. His form is right at the top level now. People saying he's undroppable for England. You can see why Newcastle United like him. We know Newcastle United like him. It's no secret. They watched him. They tried to get him on several occasions. Will they get him in the summer?
Oh, I mean, they were certainly very, very keen last summer. You know, they tried and tried with Leicester 3 or 4 different bids to try and get the Foxes to sell. To no avail. I think, you know, that interest certainly hasn't gone away. I think we've touched on it many times on this pod this season about how he hasn't let that transfer sort of rumour distract him. You know, he's arguably enjoyed one of his best seasons in a Leicester team that's really struggled to find, you know, a consistent run of form. So, certainly going to be, you know, up there among their top targets. I think he fits the bill of what Eddie Howe wants, as you say. You know, he was very, very good for England the other night in a crowded field of attacking players. So, you know, I don't think there'll be many fans, you know, on Tyneside turning their nose up at a deal of that quality.
Do you think the fact that he has only got a year or so left to run on his contract, will Newcastle potentially be getting a bargain? And then if Leicester get dragged into this relegation battle as well, there's another potential there of trying to find a bargain? Or do you think Leicester, regardless of whether Maddison signs an extension, regardless of whether they do get dragged into the Championship, they will be getting top dollar for James Maddison because he's just such a talented player?
Yeah, I think Leicester and Brendan Rodgers have made it clear that, you know, they really don't want to lose them. You know, it does sound like, you know, the whispers coming out of his camp and even from Leicester that they are resigned to losing him this summer. I think they're still going to charge, you know, a pretty penny for him. He's, you know, 26 years old. He's, you know, starting to make waves in the England camp. He's been one of the best, you know, number 10s in the league this season. You're still probably going to be looking at close to what Leicester were asking for him last season because they're in no rush to sell. You're probably going to get a bit in more if Newcastle go back in for him, knowing that, you know, the likes of Manchester City, maybe even Arsenal, are still going to be interested in him. I don't think it's going to be a deal that Newcastle can do on the cheap, despite only having a year left on his deal.
Well, this is it. You know, he's clearly a very talented player, but his form the last year hasn't always been all that consistent. Of course, going into the summer now, it looks like he's back in the best form of his career. And that might just alert the likes of Arsenal, the likes of Manchester City to him. Whereas before, maybe Newcastle were potentially the only suitors for him. Whereas now they are going to have to do battle with the likes of Arsenal, Manchester City, which means from Newcastle point of view, you know, Champions League qualification is going to be a must if you're going to go out and sign James Maddison, isn't it?
It's going to be a must if they want to go and really sign that sort of top level type of player, and be able to sort of fend off other teams. Manchester City have made no secret that they're very, very keen. I think Newcastle maybe didn't miss the boat last summer, but I think last summer was probably the perfect time to buy him. As you say, he's gone from strength to strength this season. Enjoyed a really, really good campaign in a Leicester team that struggled, for about half the campaign. Hopefully they haven't missed the boat on him. He's spent plenty of time at the World Cup with 3 or 4 players from Newcastle's camp, which I'm sure will have done, Newcastle chances absolutely no harm. But look, for a player of his quality and a few more players that we're going to mention on this list, Newcastle are going to face real competition, which means, that top 4 finish is absolutely crucial.
What do you think they like about him? Why is James Maddison top of this list?
Look, he's even, when he was at Norwich before he was at Leicester, you could tell he was a real star. He's, bags full of goals, really, really exciting on the ball, hard working without it. The only issue I've got with Newcastle signing him, and I think it would be a brilliant signing, is that I just don't know where he really fits in this team. Not in terms of his quality. I think he walks into the team in terms of quality. But we've seen Eddie Howe already this season is very reluctant to change the shape. James Maddison's came on the record before and said he doesn't want to play on the left. He doesn't want to play on the right. He wants to play in a number 10 behind the striker. And we haven't really seen an out-and-out number 10 for Newcastle this season.
But could you argue that is because they don't have the quality player to play that number 10? They have players who can play in a number 10 role, but maybe Eddie Howe doesn't want to change it because they're not a top quality number 10. Whereas if you go out and spend 50, 75 million on James Maddison, you're buying a player whose priority role is a number 10, and therefore you might be willing to change the formation, change the setup to suit someone of that quality. You're not rolling the dice, whereas you might be if you want to play Sean Longstaff, for example, in that number 10, or Alan St. Maximin or Miguel Almiron. You're going out and buying Maddison, you know exactly what you're getting.
Yeah, of course there is a case for that. I think it's a very good point. I think it would have been interested in the summer if they'd signed someone like Maddison, if they'd signed someone like Lucas Paqueta, to see whether Howe would have changed it. I look at that team personally and think Joe Willock could do a job in the number 10. I know he's got the legs to be sort of a box-to-box midfielder. I think Longstaff has proven that he's got a really good eye for getting in positions that a number 10 would in front of goal. And as you've mentioned, Miggy and Maxi could play there. But Howe just hasn't tried it. So will that be on Howe's mind? I don't know. I think you're getting a fantastic player if you sign him. I just don't know whether he in this current team, in this current setup, in this current formation, where Howe likes to play sort of 3 deeper line midfielders, I'm just not sure whether Maddison would fit straight into that.
We're getting plenty of comments live on YouTube and Facebook, which is great to see. So Truel says, have a feeling Maddison won't happen, although they hope it does. We've got Mark saying, not so much about how Maddison fits in. It's another member of squad depth where Newcastle can switch and swap. And Billy's on his holidays in sunny Spain. They like to point out that providing the harmony of the squad is not interrupted by mass comings and goings, the team are building nicely towards where we would like the club to be on a regular basis. We've spoken about the harmony in the group many times on this podcast. People will be saying it's one of your favourite things to point out, Andrew. And it is, because it is massive. And I think Newcastle, in many ways, are a little bit unique in that sense that Eddie Howe likes to judge a player on how he fits into the squad. Has he got the right attitude? It's not necessarily based on when he's a top quality player. If he's a little bit of a, so-and-so away from the pitch, that's all right, as long as he does it on the pitch. James Maddison, does he pass that character test?
Yeah, I think he does. I think as we've touched on, he could have easily have let the summer headlines about him getting a move, could have let that affect his game. He hasn't. As far as we were, he hasn't gone out and said to Brendan Rodgers, I want to hand in a transfer request and force a move. He's been happy to, bide his time at Leicester. I think from what we've seen of him, his character's good. I know he had that little incident with England a couple of years ago where, he was spotted in a casino and stuff like that. But Gareth Southgate is clearly, forgiven him for that. They've obviously aired that out in public and Southgate's trusting him again. So I think in terms of character, I don't think you can really question it.
I mentioned there the importance of getting Champions League football, and to coin a phrase says, well, Bruno came without Champions League. It's a project. It's not necessarily vital to him moving. I'm going to disagree there. I think Bruno arriving slightly different to James Maddison arriving. No doubt in Bruno top quality player. You know, there's a reason Newcastle went out and got him. Reason the likes of Juventus and Arsenal were linked, but they weren't strongly linked. You know, whereas Maddison, proven in the Premier League, we know he's got many, many, many admirers. He's going to leave in the summer. He's not going to be a Leicester player next season, regardless of which league they're in. And just because he's proven in the Premier League and he's at that kind of right age, you know, he's going to want to play European football, isn't he? I mean, for me, I think maybe Champions League football isn't the necessity, but European football most certainly has to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, when you've seen how close Leicester have gone in recent years to, you know, consistently being up there in the top six and disrupting the big six, you know, a player of James Maddison's quality is going to want to be playing those games. He's going to have the options to be playing in those competitions, whether that comes from Newcastle or elsewhere. And as I mentioned, I think there's going to be a lot of competition for him this summer, knowing his contract situation. And Newcastle need to have, you know, the strongest hand possible for that, and that means, you know, salvaging securing a top 4 position.
Milkshake, he says Maddison would be mint, so would Maddison and Bruno. That would be class. And Mark says, I feel we should go and get Mourinho back too. Now, I was thinking about this actually just the other day, because he's really, you know, it's just impressive. He's in the Spain squad. He's one of those you wish stayed longer on Tyneside, and maybe the time now would be the right time to go and, you know, test the water. Although I can't see it happening. You know, he's quite happy where he is. A big money signing that would be. But interestingly, the names that we've got written down on the list here, 4 of them are midfielders. 3 of them are midfielders. 2 of them centre midfielders. We can kind of see where we think Newcastle are going to be aiming for in the summer.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's, you know, priority number 1. I think it was probably priority number 1 in January, even before Shelvey left. Certainly now, you know, Eddie Howe's made no secret of the fact he feels that the club are light there. I think you need 1, if not 2, in that position in the summer, especially if they qualify for, you know, even the Europa League. They need a bit more depth in the middle, because we've seen when Bruno's out or when Joelinton's out, you know, the talent and the depth, the quality they got just isn't there. So I think certainly a central midfielder, whether that's holding or a bit more attacking, is going to be the priority this summer.
Well, you see, we've got 5 names written down. We could have had a few more. One of the names we haven't got written down, but who would not have been lost on this list, is Youri Tielemans, James Maddison's Leicester City teammate. Another one who previously has been strongly linked. You know, the rumours aren't so much there since the January window closed. But if you're talking about a centre midfielder with quality who's proven, he's up there with the names that you could pick out. But I just don't think I just can't see that one happening.
This might be an unpopular opinion because of how much people love James Maddison, but I think Youri Tielemans would be a much better signing. I think than James Maddison. I think he walks into pretty much any team in the Premier League, if not Europe. I think Leicester losing him on a free is an absolute crime. He would be one I'd be really, really excited about. So much experience at a young age, whether that was, you know, when he was in Belgium or whether he's, you know, came to Europe in the Premier League. I think he would be an absolutely fantastic sign. Again, I'm not sure that would happen. But look, you know, he's out of contract in the summer. It would be a huge statement if it could go out and get him.
Let's then just finish there with James Maddison. What shall we do? Should we say out of 10 the likelihood of it happening? What are you thinking about the ranking system here?
Out of 10, I would give it a 7.5. I think he was that top target in the summer. They didn't get him. We've seen that this team behind the scenes aren't afraid to go for players that they've already missed out on. 7.5, leaning towards an 8, I think.
I think that's the key point there that you've mentioned. You know, we've seen it previously with the likes of Botman, Isak, Tekier, who obviously went to the PSG, but they like to stick to a certain list and they've got their targets, and if they miss out, they'll go again until it's totally off the table. But yeah, I think the only thing that could really get in the way of James Maddison coming to Newcastle United, I don't think it'll be the price tag. I don't think it would be the desire of Maddison to move to Tyneside. I don't think it would be wages. I think it would just be which of the teams are in for him. And if it's an Arsenal, a Manchester City, alongside Newcastle United, I think that could be a hard sell. It's not going to be a hard sell to join Newcastle United, but when you're offered the chance to work with the Pep Guardiola, alongside the likes of Haaland, and so, you know, it's going to be a hard race to win. But stranger things have happened. We'll go on to another name now. Kieran Tierney of Arsenal, left back. Contract runs till June 2026. Loads of people talk about Tierney as a potential captain of Arsenal. You know, he's impressed when he's had his opportunities this season. It's been limited. He's only completed 2 full games of 90 minutes in the Premier League. What's your thoughts on this one?
I think I'm going to be in the minority for this one, because for me, Kieran Tierney's got loads of strengths. Very, very experienced despite his age. You know, captained Scotland on occasion, can play left back, can play sort of left centre back in a back five. But for me, it's just his injury record. I just can't get over the fact that you're signing a player that just, and it's not just recently, you know, this season he's actually managed to stay relatively fit, you know, despite not being able to get in over Zinchenko. But he's too injury prone for me.
Is there an element where you ask why Arsenal, who look like they're going to be Premier League champions this season, that's where they want to stay? They want to be in that conversation for many years to come, as do Newcastle United. Would there be a question to why Arsenal would let Tierney go to Newcastle United, who is likely to be a direct competitor for Premier League title in the years to come?
Yeah, I mean, potentially. As you say, he struggled this season to get first team minutes because Zinchenko has been so good at left back. And also, you know, he's had a couple of little niggles here and there. You don't know whether the player himself, you know, having been a regular at Celtic, having been really hyped up when he signed for Arsenal, is maybe itching for a bit more minutes that he's not going to get. Under Arteta, as I said, a lot of strengths, a lot to like about him. Very, very good player. I think he would be a massive upgrade to what they've got now at left back. But I'm just not sure if there's better options out there in the market.
Jody agrees with you. No chance on Tierney. Injured far too often. Great player, though. You know, but could it be that his injury record is behind him now? He might just stay fit for the rest of his career.
Yeah, potentially. But I think it's a huge risk, especially when, you know, Arsenal are probably going to be asking for, you know, top dollar for him.
I think 25, 30 million.
Yeah,
sort of.
I think it's and look, in the grand scheme of things, some would say that's not a big amount of money, but I think for a left back, you know, 30 million is maybe, you know, pushing the boat out a bit.
It's a big shame though, isn't it? Because he is, as you've said there, a really good quality player. He's good going forward. He's got that leadership.
Yeah.
He's vocal, potential captain material. I mean, look, you know, they go through a rigorous, medical examination. Maybe they'll not find anything wrong.
Look, if Newcastle's went out and signed Kieran Tierney this summer, which, you know, from what we've been hearing, that they are interested in him, Howe really does like him. There's nothing. I would not be disappointed at that deal at all.
We looking here at the list, and 4 of the players on this list, Premier League players, experienced Premier League players. Where is Eddie Howe and the scouting team, you think, aiming for? Is Premier League experience going to play a massive part in the potential arrivals this summer, do you think?
I think so. I think if you look at what Newcastle have done in the last couple of windows since the takeover, that 1st January was all about, let's get experience in. Kieran Trippier, Nick Pope, Dan Burn, Matt Targett, all players with, you know, vast Premier League experience. In the summer, you know, they maybe went down a little bit of a different route. They decided to go for a bit of youth, Isaac Botman, players who have done it in Europe, very, very highly rated in the Premier League. I think this summer we're going to see a mix. You know, Dan Ashworth is really, really keen to sign young, hungry players that aren't necessarily going to go in the first team, but that can be nurtured and moulded and sent out on loan. And then, you know, Newcastle don't have to go out and spend 100 million because they've got, you know, a Garang Kowal coming through the youth ranks. But I think if Newcastle want to disrupt the top 6 on a regular basis, they need to be signing players that have been playing for Arsenal, you know, Manchester United, even the likes of James Maddison, who have been in the Premier League for 6-7 years. So I think we'll see a mix of it this summer, but they do need a bit more experience. And I think the Carabao Cup final really showed that. You look at that Manchester United team, Casemiro, Varane, De Gea, Rashford, players who have been there, done it, and Newcastle at the minute just don't have that.
To kind of phrase says, Amanda Sterry said, we can't afford one bad buy. It's too risky, Tierney, with that injury history, which I think is the point you're making there. It definitely looks like, though, Newcastle will target a left back in the summer. We know a centre midfield of some sort is high on the list. Left back, the second priority, do you think?
Yeah, I would say so. I think they've gone out in January and made sure they had a backup for Trippier. Matt Targett was obviously one of their summer signings that hasn't really worked out from this season. Dan Burns done really well in that role, but we all know that he's not a natural in that role. I think it makes sense that you need to go out and get a proper first choice natural left back if they're going to be playing in Europe next season.
I'll just go back to my question about asking it why Arsenal would let Tierney go to a direct rival. We saw it in January as well. Newcastle were very keen on Conor Gallagher, who's actually not on the five we've picked. But Chelsea, were asking for a ridiculous amount of money. Didn't really want to loan him out to someone who could potentially and looks likely to steal a top 4 place or at least a European place off them. They're going to face similar problems in the summer, aren't they? Where to get these players to Newcastle isn't going to be the hardest challenge because, they're going to offer big wages probably, and they're going to have a project that they can sell. It's going to be persuading the teams, as you mentioned there, Manchester United, Arsenal, Man City, Chelsea, to sell to a direct rival.
Absolutely. And I mean, Newcastle really struggled last summer when they wanted 4 of Chelsea's players, and Chelsea just pretty much refused to do any business with them last August. Fast forward a year, Newcastle are in a completely different position. This was when they were a mid-table team with, dreams of being in the top 4. Now, in the summer, they're going to be potentially playing Champions League, Europa League, conference football, trying to get players off teams that are already in these competitions. Their job is going to be much harder, but look, this is why Ashworth and his team have been working behind the scenes. Vast scouting networks, they wanted to hire scouts for Brazil, Argentina, Germany, Spain, so that they're not relying on Premier League players Premier League teams doing business with them. But certainly it's going to be absolutely massive. And, we're going to go on to a player next for Manchester United. Newcastle have had, real trouble with Man United over the years. The likes of Jesse Lingard, that Dubravka deal probably hasn't done them any favours either. Absolutely, it's going to be very, very difficult going forward.
Kieran Tierney, then, are we saying out of 10, what's the likelihood?
Look, as I said, Newcastle do seem to like him, despite that injury record we've talked about. They're wanting a left back. I'd go, in terms of how likely, I'd go 7. 7,
there we go. On to Scott McTominay then. He is a man who has been strongly linked with a loan move in January, and over recent weeks been linked with a permanent move this summer. Contracted to June 2025. Only 26, scored 2 for Scotland earlier on the international break. Only played 508 minutes in the Premier League this season for Manchester United. He's at the age really where he needs to be playing week in, week out. Interesting one, when the story broke in January and then again recently, there's been a massive debate on social media, probably more weighted to not being happy with the rumour to McTominay. I'm just going to go out and say it. Look, if it's good enough for Eddie Howe, it's good enough for me. Good enough for you?
Yeah, I'm expecting a barrage of comments here on the Facebook and the YouTube that aren't happy with us. And then look, they're already coming in now. Please no McTominay not. For me, I'll be quite happy with Scott McTominay. And I know that is gonna, because you say it like create a debate. It didn't really create a debate. I think the rumours of it's very one-sided. James Maddison's very one-sided that everybody thinks it's a good deal. I'm really surprised at how many people are against the guy signing.
Do you know what? He's not a sexy name. He's not a sexy player.
Yeah.
But he'll just do the job, which will allow Bruno, Joe Linton, Isaac to flourish. In many ways, he's kind of like a Toyota player, someone who's just going to break the play up. He's going to not grab the headlines, but he's going to do the dirty work, which allows the flashy headline grabber players to run wild.
Look, Jose Mourinho brought him through at Manchester United. He was an absolute regular week in, week out under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Yes, he struggled a bit for game time under Erik ten Hag, but that's probably because Casemiro's joined. He plays he plays every single game for Scotland. He's a leader. He's only 26. There's a lot to like about this type of deal, and I think it probably wouldn't break the bank either, which is obviously a bonus.
Jordy says McTominay, no, which is quite a few of the comments along that similar thought. Trul says First, McTominay is a red devil. He will cost way more than he is worth, and Man United would not sell to Newcastle United in their opinion. It's getting worse to kind of face his expensive cover. I'm not convinced he would swap bench for bench anyway. I guess the big question is, and they're not, like for like players, but you would think if McTominay arrived, at least for the start of next season, you would probably see Joe Linton and Bruno keep their place, and then it would be McTominay in for Sean Longstaff. Is he better than Sean Longstaff?
Yes. And I know I'm going to get pelters for it, but I think he is. I think on his day, you'd have McTominay over him. He adds goals from midfield. I really do like him. I really do. And I know Newcastle fans are just dead against it, but I think you could do a lot worse. I think there's a very good point being made there in the comments that Manchester United, as I've already mentioned, might not be willing to do business with him. But I think if he's open to the move and Man United are looking to sell him, Newcastle could do a lot worse than going out and forking out for him.
Because it is the sort of style that he plays. That's kind of what Newcastle United have missed this season, isn't it? Where you haven't really got a player of his style who can really cover the back four. Sean Longstaff's tried. Bruno does a job to a degree. Joe Linton, well, he's just a tank, but that's not what he's on the pitch for. Whereas McTominay can sit and he can just help protect the back line.
Yeah, he can. He's very, very good at holding in that number 6 role. He's got bags of energy, decent passer. As I mentioned, he does like to go from midfield. We saw him obviously score twice the other night. For Scotland, he scored, plenty for Manchester United. I think you could do a lot worse. And I think, yes, someone's putting it's expensive cover, but even if he does come in and sit on the bench, very, very good option.
See, but I think if he came in, I don't think he'd be first team. He would be cover. I think he'd come in and he'd be a starter. Trill says, why buy Man United rejects? I don't get that, to be honest. And I want to address this point to a wider degree because I think, and I don't mean any disrespect to Trills, and this isn't aimed at you, this is aimed at kind of a portion of fans in general, not just Newcastle fans, but I think across the board. Sometimes there can be a bit of snobbery, I think, when it comes to names being linked. For instance, when I mentioned Philip Billing the other day, why would we buy someone that goes down and gets relegated? Why would we buy a Man United reject? Just because it hasn't worked out for them at these teams, it doesn't mean they're bad players. It doesn't mean they can go on to achieve absolutely fantastic things. And I think sometimes you just got to take a step back and say, right, okay, he's only played 500 minutes of football this season. Does that mean he's a bad player? Or does that mean they've got someone like Casemiro who is a level above, and that's why you can't get into the side?
And also, speaking of, signing teams as rejects, do you think Arsenal were saying the same thing about Zinchenko and Gabby Jesus? I bet they were. Oh, why are we signing Manchester City's B team? They're going to go on and win the league. And look, that's not me saying that Scott McTominay's going to win Newcastle United the league. But if we're signing a player who's played, close to 100 games for Manchester United, I don't think that's a bad thing, in my opinion.
No, not at all. Derek says, I agree. McTominay is better than Sean Longstaff marginally. We should be looking for something better. Jody says, not going to lie, if we brought McTominay in, I'd be disappointed. It's interesting, isn't it? In many ways, Aaron, do you think Newcastle are maybe victims of their own success? Because obviously the project has jumped forward, hasn't it, a couple of seasons? Newcastle finished, let's say, even just in the Conference League, it's still well ahead of where they expected to be. Does that then cloud people's judgment in terms of the transfer targets? If Newcastle, for instance, would just finish 9th or 10th, McTominay might be better received than if they're going to finish 4th and they sign McTominay.
Absolutely. I think if you rewind a year when Newcastle were finishing 10th and Scott McTominay was playing week in, week out for Ralph Rangnick at Manchester United, I think a lot of people would have taken that deal. I think now, should Newcastle finish in the top 4, or some fans can be thinking, right, well, you've got to go and sign, top 4 players. I think they need depth more than anything. They need cover. They need a bigger squad, players that have been there, done it, and McTominay ticks all those boxes.
Graham Morton says, McTominay has an aggressive characteristics that would have missed at times this season. Sometimes you need to mix it up. Truel says, the question is, has McTominay played well in the last 2 seasons? I think yes. I just think Man United got the opportunity to sign Casemiro, who would walk into most teams on the face of the planet. And that's why he doesn't get picked. And Sam Milner, who, by the way, if we remember, wasn't a big fan of James Maddison. I don't know if that has changed. Sam there from Newcastle Fans TV. He says, Scott McTominay, the thinking man's Andy Fye. Terrible idea. I think that's extremely harsh on McTominay. And we'll give... Andy Fye. We'll give Milkshakey his where she says, McTominay would be good. Just talk about Valovic. Do you want to do it? Do you want to do it? I mean, he's going to cost a bit of money, isn't he?
I mean, I think, the last person we're going to talk about currently, a striker in Italy, not Vlahovic, but going to cost a lot of money. I know Juventus have got their issues with their finances, and they might have to have a fire sale if we think that James Maddison is going to have suitors this summer. I think Vlahovic is going to have a lot more, including the likes of City, United, maybe Newcastle, but it would be a hell of a lot of money to get him from Juventus.
McTominay then out of 10. Can we see him arriving in the summer? I'll jump in straight away, right? I can. I think he is towards the top of the list of what Eddie Howe and the scouting staff want. I know we can clearly see it's not going to be a popular move in the first instance. But again, I go back to the first point I made about McTominay. If it's good enough for Eddie Howe, good enough for Steve Nixon, good enough for Dan Ashworth, then of course Newcastle fans will back it. This, I think, has got legs. They've clearly watched him, they clearly like him. He's going to want to get somewhere with first team football. The big question is whether Man United will sell. But yeah, I'm going to go like a 8.5 here.
I'll go 7. I think that it's obvious they like him. They were very keen on him in January when they were looking for a midfielder. Big ask to see Man United selling him, depending on who they buy this summer. I'll go 7.
7. Let us know in the comments what you think. On to another central midfielder, James Ward-Prowse, 28 years of age. June 2026 is when his contract is up. 28 appearances, 7 goals this season. Linked again earlier this week. Thoughts on this one?
I'm surprised you even had to write those notes down, given how much you are obsessed with James Ward-Prowse. Honestly, I feel you are on commission for James Ward-Prowse getting a move this summer. I feel like you've got a secret agency deal going on with him. I like James Ward-Madison. James Ward-Prowse.
Yeah, if you could make them together, I'd be all over that.
But I like the player. I think you'd be a good addition. I just don't understand why this is your sole purpose this season is to get.
I just think he's underrated, right? And is there a better dead ball specialist?
No, I don't think so.
He can pick a pass. He can do more than just score free kicks. He's a leader. He's a captain of Southampton. I think he should be in the England squad as well. I think he's quality. The only thing that puts me off slightly is that he's gonna cost a heck of a lot of money, and I don't think he would be too much cheaper. And I'm saying this in terms of what's 20 million between friends, than the likes of James Maddison, maybe Scott McTominay. He's going to be in the same region, and it's whether you kind of go with your Newcastle United and the money's there. Do you spend 75 million on James Maddison, or do you spend 50 million on James Ward-Prowse? And I think you would have to opt towards Maddison for if they were the prices. But that being said, he's coming to the right time of his career, got the experience behind him. Mm-hmm. Newcastle United is built on a team of leaders. Add him into the mix, he'll be another fantastic leader there. I just think he would fit perfectly in this Newcastle United squad. Will it happen? I'm not too sure. I think they've probably got other targets that they like and other players. But yeah, I do think he's a brilliant player.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think his leadership is absolutely exceptional. Probably not a better free kick taker in the Premier League at present. 28, as you say, I think he's going to cost a lot. It depends probably whether Southampton go down. I think if they go down, they lose him, definitely. I think even if they stay up, Villa were very close to signing him last summer. Newcastle have been interested. I'm just not too sure. I think in this team, you've got, as you said, with McTominay, I think Bruno and Joelinton keep their spot. Do you think he then walks in over Willock, over Longstaff?
Yeah. Maybe not so much Willock. I'd have a bigger fight on his hands, but Longstaff, yeah, definitely. Unfortunately, I Longstaff, I think, is going to have to really, really step up, and he has done, and credit to him. But if you're asking me which one of those I think's under threat most, it's going to be Sean Longstaff, I think. And if it's between Ward-Prowse and Sean Longstaff, for me, it's Ward-Prowse every day of the week. We've got Jory saying we shouldn't line the Man United pocket full stop. And let's just go back to this because, this is, I think Jory might be doing it a bit in jest, but the opportunity comes up to sign a good quality player and one of your rivals is willing to sell. I mean, you go back to Andy Cole moving from Newcastle to Manchester United. Sir Alex Ferguson's thought wasn't, well, we don't want to be lining Newcastle United's pockets. I want that player. He's going to improve my team. Let's put a cheeky bid in. And that's the way it should be. It's about how it improves your team. Let's forget about paying the rate to the selling team. It's about how it improves your team.
I think Geordie was maybe saying that a bit in jest. I think he's put a laughing face at the end of his comment.
He's got the bite then, hasn't he? He's got the bite.
He's caught a big one there with you, to be fair. But yeah, look, I don't think, you should worry about if we don't line Man United's pockets for that, best players, somebody else will. So I wouldn't be concerned about
that. Right. So James Ward-Prowse, what are we thinking?
Look, I would really like the deal to happen. I think he's a good player. I think he would fit in this team well. I just think he might cost a bit too much, and Newcastle have got targets, higher up the list. I think you're also probably looking at even the likes of, and I'm not saying, they would get him over Newcastle, but I think Villa will definitely still be interested. I think even a team like Brighton, Fulham, all these teams, not just the teams in the top 6, would want James Ward-Prowse. I think the likelihood's probably a 6.
Would you look at that? After weeks of silence, the builders are back. Can you get that?
They must know that we're doing the pod, Sunderland fans.
It's a shame they're not listening to it and subscribing like everyone else listening to this is. Hopefully it's not too distracting. I'm going to go 6. Look, big fan of him. He has been linked to Newcastle. That's why he's on that list. But I just think there's other targets that Newcastle United will go for. And I suppose this is the big question. Like, what are we expecting this summer? Are we expecting just one big money signing, let's say James Maddison, and then they go out and they look for maybe a free transfer, they look for youngsters? Or do you think we could see 1, 2, 3 big money signings? What do you think the budget will be? What do you think the approach will be?
I think they kept the powder relatively dry in January. I know they obviously spent 40 million on Anthony Gordon, but I think, compare that to the last 2 windows before that, there's money to be spent in the summer, especially if they qualify for Champions League. I think Eddie Howe and Ashworth are both aware that this squad needs, 5, 6, 7 players added to it just to make sure they've got enough depth, enough quality to stay there. I think we're probably likely to see maybe the transfer record broken again. I don't think it'll go too crazy. You can't see them bringing in an 80, 90, 100 million pound player, but certainly, testing the waters on what they paid for Isak, I think is probably to be expected.
Will that question be a lot easier to answer when we know a bit more about potential sponsorships coming in? Do you think?
Absolutely. I think as soon as they get that deal done for shirt sponsor, if they go ahead with, the plans that they're considering about selling the naming rights to St James's Park, even just qualifying for the Champions League. I mean, it's the huge difference between qualifying for the Champions League and even qualifying for the Europa League. The money that you get just for reaching the group stage of the Champions League alone, is hefty. So it all depends on where they finish this summer, I think.
The McTominay debate, and I say debate because it's not a debate at all today.
It's me and you against the world, I think.
Rages on. Mark says he's a 10 to 15 million pound player. That would be a decent squad player. No more. Definitely not what I would consider a first teamer. And Joe's back. You might remember Joe, who was not very happy that me, the self-proclaimed chairman and founder of the Miguel Almiron fan club, said he should be rested for Jacob Murphy. Joe was not having it. And he says, don't forget the tune off flying. Players will want to come here. When we beat Man United, we're on the Champions League place and we will stay in the top 4. I'm loving that enthusiasm, Joe. We just need a few more Miggies. Honestly, right, this is not me.
Joe Bader.
It's not. Seriously, it's not. Joe, he can take over as the founder of the fan club. But, he's right. Players will want to come here. And I don't think that's actually going to be the issue unless you are battling against a Man City or an Arsenal. Even then you could say, well, look, we'll guarantee your first team football. That still might not be enough if it is James Maddison, for example, as I mentioned earlier. I just think the players Newcastle United will be aiming for, players who aren't on this list, like a Conor Gallagher, maybe like a Ruben Loftus-Cheek, for example. Chelsea will look around and say, well, are we going to sell to you? I think that's the issue, persuading the top teams to sell to Newcastle United. There's going to be a big rich owner's tax on it, and there's probably then going to be a direct competitor's tax on it as well.
Yeah, you're going to get a Newcastle premium this summer, but I think Joe's point spot on. Newcastle, since the takeover, haven't had any real issue of persuading players to join. Yes, maybe one or two, Diego Carlos, stuff like that. But on the whole, they've pinched Bruno from Arsenal and Juventus. They've signed Botman over at AC Milan. They're signing players even before they were getting anywhere near Champions League, selling them this dream. The quality and the caliber of players they're going to be able to sign this summer with European football potentially, at their feet. Just different level entirely.
If they qualify for the Champions League or even Europa League, the plans will change, won't they? Like we said, I was already alluded to it. I just go back to when Newcastle United had that summer spending spree under Sir John Hall and Kevin Keegan, Les Ferdinand, Warren Barton. They were breaking records left, right, and centre, but it was done. They were spending money because they wanted to win the Premier League. But that was the plan. It was, they'd come up, they'd finished third. I think then they'd finished sixth. And then the big spending happened. Whereas, like I said, they've jumped forward slightly here, regardless of where they finish. It's going to be top 8, isn't it? Do they then need to go out and sign, players that maybe were going to come down 2, 3, 4 seasons down the line because they're in such a position that they don't want to next season, struggle to be in the top 10. They want to continue to build and build and build. They've got to seize the opportunity now.
Oh, 100%. The goalposts have completely moved. I think, Amanda Staveley's always made it clear that the aim was, steady progress, bit by bit, building momentum, just improving on last season's finish. Then, sort of nobody expected them to be fit. Even inside the club, nobody really expected them realistically to be finishing top 4. The goalposts have absolutely moved in terms of, as you've said, Newcastle now become victims of their own success. But the board and Ashworth now need to start thinking, right, well, the plans have, escalated. What the players that we wanted to sign 2, 3 years down the line are going to have to come now. But the only issue they have, as you say, is still no shirt sponsor other than Fun 88. No real big sponsorship deals that are going to generate huge amounts of money.
And they've got to move players on, which is the other issue. And players that they just don't have many suitors. I mean, who's going to go after Ryan Fraser, Matt Ritchie, Jamal Lewis? They have a lot of players that they need to sell and try and recoup some money for. But have they really got any real sellable assets?
They don't have sellable assets. And obviously, on paper, yes, they do, because you could sell Bruno. You could sell Bruno to Real Madrid if you really wanted to. You could probably sell Botman. You could sell Isak. They're not going to do that at all. You could really look at that team and think the only sellable asset sort of is St. Maximum, or you could maybe going to get 40 million from maybe a European team's going to pay that. I'm not too sure. Other than that, you look at the players that are probably going to go this summer. As you said, Ritchie, Fraser, Dummett, Jamal Lewis. You're not going to get a lot of money in for them.
And that's the issue, because it would be nice to sell them and have a bit of extra money in the bank. St. Maximin's the interesting one. We've spoken about it before, but it wouldn't surprise me if he does leave Newcastle in the summer, and then it frees up funds placed in the squad for maybe the likes of James Maddison or Scott McTominay, if I say it quietly enough. Let's go on to the last name on the list. Well, actually, no, before we do that, there's been a few other names mentioned in the comments, so I just want to get your brief thoughts on that. Calvin Phillips?
Yeah, I would take him. I know he's fell off a cliff at City, but I think there's a proper player in there that we saw at Leeds. I think if he can get him back to full speed, I think he'd be a good signing.
Scott McTominay or Calvin Phillips? Oof. You see, Calvin Phillips on form, Leeds.
If it's the Calvin Phillips that was at Leeds,
him every day.
Pick him every day. I think now he needs to show that he's, hasn't been completely ruined by the City experience. Don't know what's happened to him. I know he's had his struggles with injuries. I'd still go Phillips, I think.
Another former Leeds man who had a big money move, hasn't quite worked out. Rafinha.
Yeah, I would take him. loved him in the Premier League, thought he was really good, would have loved Newcastle to sign him. I know obviously they were never going to compete with Barcelona. But yeah, look, if Barca need a fire sale just like Juventus, I would be absolutely all over Rafinha as well. Very, very versatile.
John Garney says Lewis was signed for 15 million. Would we realistically recoup that?
Nope.
And if we could, and also maybe let Maxi go for 30 million, that would help us out financially. Derek says Eddie would get Phillips back to his best. And Trules also says Phillips or McTominay any day of the week. And I suppose, you know, the likes of what Derek's saying, there's Eddie Howe's got history in turning careers around. Joe Linton, Longstaff. So, you know, Phillips could arrive and, you know, reach his potential. Before we speak about the last name on the list, is there anyone that we've missed out that maybe hasn't been linked, but you like to look off? You know, like I've mentioned last week, Billing for me would be I think a really good player. I like the look at Tyler Adams as well. You know, someone who's impressed in his first season in the Premier League. I know he's injured, looks likely to be out for the rest of the season, but you know, it's those sort of players which I think can add squad depth. And people in the comments will go, "Oh, they're not the quality we want." But you know, sometimes you've got to sign from teams below you. It doesn't mean they're necessarily bad players. Is anyone else you'd like to add to that list?
Yeah, I'm going for a slightly different direction. I'm saying just get the checkbook out and just pay whatever you need to pay for Moussa Diaby. I think they still need a right midfielder in Newcastle, and I think he'd just be absolutely perfect. Right age, right profile, so good in front of goal. I would love to see him at Newcastle.
John Garney says Phillips and Bruno would be a quality double act. Joe Willock, I'm assuming not the Joe Willock, says get James Maddison in. Ethan says McTominay hasn't shown enough quality to get in Howe's side. Can someone please just put a nice positive comment about McTominay, please, in the comments, just in case he's listening?
Get on your burner account and do it yourself.
Need to pick his spirits up. Right then. Well, actually, what about Ivan Toney? Newcastle, right? Because we're about to mention a striker who's going to cost a heck of a lot of money, right? And I still think Newcastle, even if they keep Wilson and they obviously keep Isak, they're going to need at least one more striker, ideally two, and ideally, well, I think I would like four anyway. They're definitely going to need another striker. Ivan Toney, quality. Obviously, he's got the FA charge hanging over him, but any likely ban is probably going to run through the summer anyway. He'll cost a bit of money, but hey, I mean, he's a top quality player, isn't he?
Yeah, I like Toney. I think the way he just absolutely bullies defenders, very, very, very good in front of goal. Incredible from the penalty spot. I still can't understand how he gets those penalties beyond the keeper every single time. Gonna cost a lot of money. I mean, a lot of money. And if the way you're talking about it there, do you think he comes in as a third choice? Do you think he comes in above Wilson? Are you really going to pay what Brentford are going to be wanting? Top dollar for this player. Probably more than we signed Isak for, I'd say.
I think it's, do you know what? I think it's a big finish to the season for Callum Wilson. I think it's a big summer for him. No doubt in his qualities, a top number 9, you know. It's just the injury concerns and where Newcastle are going to be next season, hopefully in Europe. I just wonder how long you can go on, you know, holding your breath every time he goes in for a challenge. And at some point, a big decision has to be made. Hopefully it doesn't, but I do feel it's going to come down the road at some point. He's probably going to pick another injury at some point, unfortunately, which is such a shame because, again, he's such a good player. But do you, maybe not in the summer, maybe January, maybe next summer, you know, say, okay, do we bring another striker in? And unfortunately say, yeah, sorry, Callum, you've been brilliant, but, you know, away you go.
Yeah, potentially. Look, I wouldn't be surprised if they brought in another striker this summer. You know, whether he comes in above Wilson, whether it's a youngster who's going to, you know, just be happy to be third choice. I wouldn't be, you know, completely surprised, especially if they made Europa Champions League football, if they went out and just added a bit more depth up front, because really you're only one injury away from just being stuck with Isak again.
And I guess as well, you bring Toney and he's a bit of a similar player, isn't he, to Wilson and to Isak. Maybe you need to go out and buy someone who's just a bit different.
A bit different. I think, look, if Newcastle, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but if Newcastle were to receive a good offer for Callum Wilson this summer and needed to replace him, I think Ivan Toney would be an absolutely fantastic addition. Bringing him in when you've got Wilson and Isak, I'm just not sure where he fits. I don't know, you know, I'm not too sure. Very, very good player though. I would love to see him back, even though it would cost a lot.
John says, not sure Tony is the right man for our style of play. House seems to like versatile forwards. We've got some other comments here. We've got a big shopping list here from Derek, who says dream signings: Maddison, Maddison, Diaby, and Grimaldo, who's the Benfica defender. The other Benfica player who's also consistently linked, didn't make it on this list, is Ramos, but reports of £120 million asking price. Bit expensive, isn't it?
Very expensive, but very good player. You know, proved it at the Euros. At the World Cup. Very, very good player. I really did like him. It's a bit of a shame Newcastle didn't get him this summer. I feel like the boat might have passed on that one.
Right. A lot of people in the comments have mentioned this player, the final man on our list, Victor Osimhen. Is that right?
Osimhen.
I was thinking about it too much. I've been thinking about how to pronounce his name all afternoon, thinking, please don't get it wrong. I've got it wrong. So, Victor Osimhen. There we go. Natural. Napoli striker, 21 league goals in 24 games this season. He scored a few more in the Champions League. Contracted to June 2025. Report of a price tag, 100 million or so.
Yeah.
This would be a big, big signing, wouldn't it? Now, I think the names we've mentioned, Maddison, Tierney, McTominay, Ward-Prowse. You see, if Maddison, right, joins Newcastle, no one's going to be all that surprised because we know Newcastle like him, they've watched him, they've tried before. No one's going to be that surprised. I think Osimhen would be the man that would really rattle not just the Premier League, but, you know, the big players in European football as well, because it's a massive statement signing.
Oh, I mean, if Newcastle were to get him, it would absolutely rattle a few cages, not less because they would be breaking a Premier League record to do so. You know, Napoli coming out this week and saying they want 150 million euros, you know, roughly 131 million for him. Look, we've spoken about there being competition for Maddison, there potentially being competition for James Ward-Prowse. I mean, this would just be off the scale. Every other week he's linked with Manchester United, Chelsea after him, Arsenal keen on him. Huge talent. I have seen him, you know, we've seen him a couple of times already linked with a move to Newcastle, a lot of it based in Italy, a lot of it, you know, Italian publications maybe trying to garner some interest from. But yeah, huge talent.
Is that the issue when you do have players like him linked? Is that I guess, explain to our listeners and viewers how it works from your point of view, how you sort through what is utter rubbish to what is actually got a bit of truth in it. Because what we're seeing already and what we're going to see for the years to come is, oh, wait there, Newcastle United are a very rich club.
Yeah.
XYZ linked, not necessarily because it's got any evidence or concrete to it, just simply because Newcastle are a very rich club.
Yeah, I mean, we've already seen it in the last 18 months or so. A lot of foreign publications seem to just throwing Newcastle's name in the mix because all of a sudden they've, you know, got some of the wealthiest owners in world football. We saw ludicrous reports last summer, didn't we? Neymar, Pogba, these type of players being linked where, you know, it's not going to happen. Now, as Newcastle United grow and as this, you know, start to qualify for the Champions League on a regular occasion, these names probably don't become so outlandish. But I think where Newcastle are at the minute, certainly until they've guaranteed top four football, you're never going to be beating someone like Chelsea or Manchester United or Manchester City to play like Osimhen or Vlahovic or anything like this. But they went out and broke their record for Isak, who, look, yes, he was 60 million, which in terms of the, you know, record spend in the Premier League isn't too much. There's nothing to say that they won't go and break it again. I just think players of that ilk are just probably too far away at this.
Well, you're talking there about what would happen if Tony came in. Where would he fit in terms of the ranking? Well, this fella comes in, he's going to be straight in that first team, isn't he? No question.
Absolutely. And look, Isak's done fantastically well. He's really adapting. I think in the next couple of months, if he can stay fit, we're going to really see the best of him. But a player like Osimhen, who's you know, consistently scoring for Napoli, you know, they're going to win Serie A by about 20 points a season. He's probably going to finish top scorer. Absolutely fantastic talent. And it's so easy to see why all these big teams are linked because, you know, clearly he would be, I mean, he walks into that first team in pretty much any Premier League team, never mind Newcastle.
Do you think Newcastle United look at players and they go, well, obviously we'd like to have him, but we know Manchester United, PSG are also linked, and they go, like you've just said there, that's not for now. We're not going to even bother testing the water, or do you think they do put some feelers out and go, well, okay, if we come in, would you be interested in coming here over, whoever it might be?
Oh, absolutely. I think we've already seen the last couple of months or to the last 12 months, they've got scouting operations going on in a lot of countries. They will definitely be having conversations with the likes of Napoli for other players, the likes of for Benfica for Ramos, and saying, look, how much will it cost to take this player? We might not be able to afford him. You might not want to come, but ballpark, what's it going to take? And look, it would be a huge statement. I don't think there'd be anybody, disgruntled with that happening. I just think it's probably too soon in Newcastle's journey at the moment.
Sam says Osimhen is class, but lots of goals in Serie A doesn't always translate to a lot of goals in the Premier League, which is true. But also, I think he's a little bit worried that his main man, Isak, would be under threat should Osimhen sign. Out the player, well, give me your rating then for this one. I mean, I'm going to put this down a 3.
Oh, I was going to go 3 as well. I'm going to go 3 as well.
Great minds.
I just think for what Napoli want, and Napoli, by the way, aren't one of these teams that easily sell. De Laurentiis, their owner, is notoriously a tough negotiator. That they're showing it with Koulibaly and other players, Insigne. They just don't let them go unless the value's right. You're going to probably be paying 130 million for him. I just think, 3 out of 10.
So the names that we've got written down here: Maddison, Tierney, McTominay, Ward-Prowse, and Osimhen. Who are you saying is most likely to join Newcastle United this summer?
James Maddison.
I'm going to go McTominay.
Okay.
Don't at me, guys.
You got a death wish in the comments, but
don't at me. But I'm going to go McTominay. I can just see that happening. I think it's got legs. But this has been the Everything is Black and White podcast, the Monday show, recorded on Tuesday. We'll be back next Monday, as per, hopefully enjoying Newcastle United beating Manchester United. I'll be back later this week with John Gibson and the view from the opposition ahead of Sunday's game against Manchester United. Head over to the Everything is Black and White podcast on YouTube and hit that subscribe button, and head over to chroniclelive.co.uk for the latest Newcastle United news. Thank you very much, guys, for tuning in, and enjoy the rest of your week.